Saya Heather Variava, Wakil Duta Besar Amerika Serikat di Indonesia. Menyambut datangnya bulan Ramadan, saya mendoakan keberkahan selama sebulan penuh bagi semua yang menjalani. Di saat-saat penuh ketidakpastian dan kecemasan yang sedang berlangsung saat ini, saya terinspirasi oleh berbagai kisah mengenai harapan, kemanusiaan, dan kedermawanan yang tak terhitung yang kita miliki bersama. Semoga bulan ini memperkuat persahabatan kita. Selamat menunaikan ibadah puasa.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another At America TV event with me, Jasmine. I hope you all are doing well. So for those of you joining us for the first time, At America is the U.S. Embassy's American Center, and our mission is to provide a space for young Indonesians to learn more about the United States. We have temporarily moved to a digital platform so you can still enjoy all of our events at the comfort of your own home. So for tonight, we will be discussing Ramadan and female Muslim journalists in U.S. newsrooms. But before we begin, I would like to share with you guys that At America is having a giveaway as part of our 10th anniversary celebration and also a celebration of Earth Day this month. We are inviting you guys to participate in our giveaway so you guys don't miss out on a chance to receive one of the 5 folding bikes that we are giving out. So how can you guys participate? Stay tuned until the end of the event because that's when I'll be sharing with you guys how to do so. And also before we begin our events, I would like to share with you, as usual, our social media quiz question. So the question for tonight is, who was the first woman reporter to wear a hijab in the US? So is it Tahira Rahman, Ginela Massa, Amani Al-Khatabeh, or Rawaida Abdelaziz? So which one is it out of the 4 women? You guys can participate in our social media quiz by commenting on our social media platform. And for those of you who got the answer correctly, you will get a live shout out from us at the end of the program. Now, before we begin tonight's event, I would like to invite for the opening remarks from the U.S. Embassy Jakarta, Mr. Mike Quinlan, Press Attaché.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Quinlan. I'm the press attaché of the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta. So first, I would like to say Selamat Menunaikan Ibadah Puasa and Ramadan Kareem to all of you who are observing Ramadan this month. I am delighted to welcome you virtually today. Thank you very much for joining us from wherever you are, especially those from Indonesia, the United States, the Philippines, and Brunei. Ramadan really is a time when Muslims around the world focus on things like fasting and prayer, charity, and reflection. And in the United States, just like everywhere else, Ramadan is a reminder of the contributions that all of the millions of Muslim Americans do to enrich our nation every day. They serve in the government. They lead scientific breakthroughs. They create jobs as entrepreneurs. They teach in schools, and as we will see, they report the news as journalists. And today we will hear from 3 wonderful, amazing female Muslim journalists who work in U.S. newsrooms. We'll hear hopefully about their stories of success, and we'll also hear maybe some of the struggles. Many Muslim Americans choose to pursue careers in media and journalism. And despite Muslim population only being about 1.1% of the population in the United States, Muslim journalists have really attained successes in the newsroom, and they hold positions as diverse as reporters and editors to producers and presenters. And our 3 panelists today, hopefully they'll talk about their Ramadan experiences in the United States. Just like working Muslims here in Indonesia or elsewhere around the world, Muslim Americans are fasting in the workplace during Ramadan. Many Muslim Americans also share the happiness of gathering for iftar and prayers, just like in Indonesia and elsewhere. I remember my very first iftar was about 25 years ago, and it was when I was in college with my roommate, Isam, from Michigan, and our friend Carl from New Jersey. And, it was one of the happiest experiences of my college days, really sharing a lot of brotherhood and fellowship. And I know that, during the COVID pandemic, many people are joining their prayers online and doing their gatherings virtually during Ramadan. But it's still good that we can connect this way. Ramadan teaches and reinforces values that are honored by millions of people around the world from different faiths and beliefs as well. And the United States and Indonesia, we share common values like religious freedom, respect for tolerance, diversity. So today, now, while we celebrate together, let's learn from the discussion today, and let's consider how we can build broader, deeper mutual respect and cooperation amongst our people. So once again, I hope you enjoy the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pak Mike, for the warm welcome. And now to start this evening's event, I would like to invite our moderator, Ibu Yayan Rostiani, International Desk Editor at Republika.
Hello, thank you, Jasmine. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, everybody. Good morning, America. Good evening, Brunei. Good evening, Philippines. And good evening, Indonesia. Tonight, I'm super excited because the topic and the speakers are very, very fascinating. And we have 3 speakers who will be talking about Ramadan and female Muslim journalists in the U.S. newsroom. And this talk will be live broadcast on America's Online, as well as social media platforms like website, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. So hello there, American Corner Cotabato, American Spaces Philippines, and American Spaces Brunei. As for the participant here, I want to say hello to all of you. Here we have UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta, Al-Azhar University Jakarta, Bakri University, ISBA, participants from Dal Air Kolam Islamic Boarding School, fellow journalists and other audience from Indonesia, the Philippines, Brunei, and the United States. And don't forget to write your questions. There will be tough competition because not all of the question will be answered because of the limited time. So get ready. Write down your question instantly, okay? Now, allow me to introduce our speakers. And the first will be Sabrina Siddiqui. She is a Muslim journalist, and the most recent assignment is as a White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal in Washington, D.C., where she covers the Joe Biden presidency. She is also a CNN political analyst. I think we can learn more about her later. I think she can tell you more interestingly about herself. And the next will be Rumana Hussain. She is a Muslim journalist based in Chicago, Illinois. She works as an assistant metro editor at the Chicago Sun-Times. She received a BA in communication from Loyola University in Chicago and a master's science in journalism from Northwestern University. She is current board member. She is a current board member of Silk Road's Rising Theater company that focuses on Asian American and Arab American experience. And also we have Mania Iman Santoso. She is a senior TV production specialist at The Voice of America. She joined BOA in 2002. She is an Indonesian Muslim journalist based in Washington, D.C. She previously worked for several radio stations in Jakarta, including a female radio, Hard Rock FM, and Primers Radio. And she got bachelor degrees in communication and Chinese language from University of Indonesia. And then she went to Prasetya Mulia Business School for her master's degree in international management. Very interesting and very impressive, aren't they? And since time is very short, let's roll. Over to you, Sabrina, for your presentation. And you only have at most 8 minutes.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone in Indonesia. Good morning from here in Washington, D.C. Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak. I really appreciate having this forum to discuss a topic that I think is incredibly important, and that is Muslim representation within the media. You heard a little bit about my background, and I'll take this opportunity to quickly tell you a little bit more about myself. And I'm sure that a lot of you often face the same question, which is what drew you to your field? How did you decide that you wanted to become a reporter? So for me, I was always a big fan of writing from a very young age. And I was 13 years old, actually, when I decided that I wanted to be a journalist. I lived in one of those households where the news was always on, and I found it to be a very fascinating medium for storytelling. But what always stood out to me when I was old enough to notice was that there was no one in American news who looked like me. And there was no one whose name sounded like mine either. To be honest, there were only a handful of minorities, period. I don't think there were really any Muslims in the news when I was growing up as journalists. And I don't mean that just in a superficial sense or a cosmetic sense. It's a real question of substance, namely whether or not it's possible for the most powerful institutions in the country and in the world to represent individuals of all backgrounds. That lack of Muslim representation, I think, especially for me as a young adult during 9/11 and the aftermath, had a real big impact on how Muslims were being portrayed in the news and how their stories, our stories, were being told. So I think that absence of a familiar face or a familiar name, it continues to be something that we grapple with even today. Because, I said I was 13 when I decided I wanted to be a journalist. Now, a couple decades later, I've actually been covering national politics here in the United States for more than 10 years. During that time, I've had the opportunity to cover 3 presidential elections, 2012, 2016, and 2020, 3 midterm elections. I've covered Congress and Capitol Hill, and I am now covering my 3rd president. I covered former President Obama, former President Trump, and now I'm reporting on President Joe Biden. And throughout most of that time, I'm still one of just a handful of Muslim journalists on the scene and here in Washington, D.C. There are so few national reporters covering politics who are either Muslim or of South Asian descent. In my case, I can count them on one hand. And I think that it's something, when I say it, I'm not saying it as some source of pride. I'm not saying it as a badge of honor. To me, it's a reflection of the lack of representation across newsrooms in the United States, and especially in political reporting. And in political reporting, I think it matters a great deal because it really has a profound impact on public perception, on how people vote on elections, and on progress as a society and a country. So that lack of representation, of course, it's not new, but it's certainly a challenge that we have dealt with as American journalists time and again in the aftermath of 9/11 with the rise of Islamophobia. And in the last 6 years, as I'm sure many of you noticed, anti-Muslim rhetoric and anti-Muslim policies really became central to US elections and to US politics. And so as we covered those events inside of newsrooms, oftentimes I was one of the only Muslims there. And it was the same experience for my other Muslim colleagues inside of other newsrooms at other organizations, where we had to be the ones to really raise the impact of political statements, to talk about the fear sometimes that Muslim communities were living in, to talk about the rise in hate crimes and Islamophobia, and to put that in some kind of bigger context. And not just for how we covered those stories, but why we even needed to cover them at all. And that's exactly why I think we need more Muslim representation in journalism. Now, because it's Ramadan, I think I've been reflecting on these themes a lot more. And so I'll tell you a little bit about Ramadan here in Washington real quick. Of course, as I said, there's not a whole lot of Muslims in journalism here, so sometimes it can be quite an isolating experience. I had spent every single Ramadan, of course, with my family, and every Eid I celebrated with my family. And the first time I ever missed it, it was because it was the 2012 election, and I was covering Mitt Romney's campaign. He was the Republican presidential nominee. He was challenging President Obama that year. And so I was out on the campaign trail, logging in long hours, 16-hour days, 7 days a week. And of course, all the while you're fasting, no one understands really what that experience is like. I think over time, because there's more of us now, like I said, we're trying to raise the profile of Muslims inside of newsrooms. We have very generous employers who understand that we might need to work odd hours and we might have a slightly different experience during this month. But in Washington, it's especially, I think, an interesting time. And I'm going to share my screen just so you could see that there are events here in our nation's capital during Ramadan that reach the highest office in the land. So here you see former President Obama hosting an annual iftar dinner. This is a tradition that dates back many presidents. And every year, the US president gathers Muslims who are in the government, who are in politics, in civil service, for an annual iftar dinner and breaks fast with them. And I had the opportunity to cover many of those iftar dinners under President Obama. And as one of the few Muslim journalists, I also knew, this is an article when I used to work at the Huffington Post, that sometimes it was a source of controversy. So one year under President Obama, there was a call for a boycott of the White House iftar because Muslims were frustrated over the Gaza conflict and didn't feel that the Obama administration was being sufficiently supportive of Palestinians, and over NSA spying, so surveillance of Muslims. And so I wrote this story about calls to boycott the iftar. They did not boycott it. Some people did, some people did not. Another year, when President Trump came into office, it was another source of controversy because he did not invite Muslim groups to attend the iftar dinner. So this is when I was at The Guardian and I wrote about it. And President Trump did break fast, but he only had ambassadors and diplomats there. He did not invite any Muslim civil rights groups. Then you see progress because the first two Muslim women were elected to Congress in 2018, Congresswomen Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. So when I was at The Guardian, I also covered the first ever Ramadan iftar, the first iftar during Ramadan in Congress, where members of Congress broke fast together on Capitol Hill. And that was hosted by Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and two other Muslim members of Congress, Andre Carson and Keith Ellison. So it's been, I think, a time when you can, see that even politicians are reflecting, I think, more so on what that means for the Muslim community. And I think more personally, of course, the impact of COVID-19 has meant that you cannot gather the same way. So we're seeing these events being held more virtually now. But, I think we're seeing it continue to be a time of service, a time of giving back. I know here, this is a donation drive where people have been gathering, you see, with their masks. This is outside of Washington, D.C., preparing food and care packages for the elderly in the Washington area. So these are some of the efforts that continue to happen within the Muslim community writ large. And I think it's important for us as Muslim journalists to be able to highlight those events and what the Muslim community is doing during this time of reflection and of spirituality. I think really quickly, because I know I just have a minute left, I wanted to show you guys just a couple of the stories that I wrote as a Muslim journalist, as a political reporter, because I think a lot of times the Muslim community doesn't get a lot of attention here in politics. They're not one of the most influential political coalitions yet because the population is still small. So in the 2012 election, I wrote an article about how Muslims said they could not guarantee that they would vote for President Obama for a second time. And the story examined some of their frustrations, which I pointed to when I showed you the article about calls to boycott the iftar, foreign policy issues, surveillance issues here in America, a sense that he had continued some of the unpopular among Muslims policies of the Bush administration. They were also prominent Muslims in the 2016 election. And I wrote this story here about how some of the Republican candidates in 2016 were making comments that were widely criticized for being anti-Muslim. And we talked about how other candidates were reacting to some of those comments that were made about Muslims and what really was the political purpose behind those comments. At the end of the 2016 election, I wrote an essay actually about what it was like to cover that election as a Muslim journalist. I wrote that for The Guardian, which is where I was reporting at the time, because I was one of the only people, like I said, often who was in the room. And I think sometimes my colleagues in American media did not fully understand the impact of anti-Muslim statements and what kind of effect it had on Muslim communities across the country. So this was my way of talking about, what the kind of education that we have to do around Muslims and Islam in the media. In 2020, Muslims were a little bit less of a topic, I would say. They were not as prominent in terms of the political discourse. But I'm now at the Wall Street Journal, and I wrote a story about how Democratic candidates, Bernie Sanders and others, were using this idea of U.S. support for Israel as a political issue, and calling into question whether some of the policies in the region needed to change. And I think that's something that not a lot of people were paying attention to, but it's something that has ranks as a big priority for the Muslim community here in the United States and around the world. So I think for me, it was a story that I actually brought to the attention of my editors that I don't think they would have necessarily noticed if there was not a Muslim journalist inside the newsroom. So I'll say in closing that, when I've thought about the change over the years, it's interesting. I said I was one of the only people in the 2012 and 2016 elections. In 2020, I went to a Joe Biden event in Iowa as a campaign event, and there were 4 Muslims there, including myself. And there was a moment where we thought that maybe we're imagining, because how could there be 4 Muslim journalists in Iowa, in the middle of nowhere, at this political rally for Joe Biden, where we're all reporting on it. One person was there with a camera, I was there writing, someone was recording for radio, and it was really heartening because you could see how representation is slowly starting to change. But honestly, if I think about it, it shouldn't have been such a big deal for there to be 4 Muslims there inside of the room that day. It should be more common to see diverse faces and to have diverse voices at the table. I think we need to have more of a dialogue in our own communities as Muslims and encourage people to pursue non-traditional career paths like journalism, and to understand that the value of being at the table is that is how we make our voices heard. And I know there's a lot of frustration among Muslims here in the United States and around the world with the way that we are often portrayed in the media and in entertainment, especially in the Western media. And I think those sentiments are understandable. They're part of a generational struggle to educate our peers about Muslims and Islam. It's also, having said that, why we need more Muslim journalists and more representation, because I truly believe that it's time for us to write our own stories. Thank you so much.
Mbak Yayan, you're still muted.
Wow, sorry. Thank you, Sabrina. That's an eye-opener for all of us. And maybe you can tell us next time about the most memorable thing while covering the White House during Ramadan. Okay, now we go to Rumana. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
To you.
Can everybody hear me?
I cannot wait.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello. Ramadan Mubarak and Ramadan Kareem to all of those who are observing Ramadan. Just wanted to talk. It's interesting listening to Sabrina talk because I'm a lot older than Sabrina. I was born in the 70s, and just a little bit about myself. I was born in Chicago. My parents are Indian immigrants, and when my parents came here, they were part of the community that founded one of the largest mosques in the Chicago area. It's called the Muslim Community Center. And I've been a part of the Muslim community for a long time. And when I was growing up, there was probably no journalist that I knew of that looked like me, or even were Muslim. And so whenever I did see a name that sounded Middle Eastern or Arabic, I would get excited. And the first name I did see was Lorraine Ali, and she used to write for Rolling Stone magazine. So it was very exciting for me. And I didn't even know who she was, but I always was interested in wondering if she was a Muslim, in fact. So when I was growing up, my parents had no idea what a journalist did. I mean, they knew what a journalist did, but they thought that because of my name, I would never get a job. They said that there's nobody that has a name like yours. And there were a few journalists who would pop up, but I would be really excited, but I had no mentors who would help me. So I was going to say, with Sabrina's generation, I watched Sabrina on CNN. We often have the new TV on in our newsrooms when there was no pandemic, and we actually were inside a newsroom, and we'd have CNN, and I would see Sabrina often on a newsroom panel discussion. And I have to tell you, as someone who's South Asian and Muslim, it's very exciting to see that. And there's a lot of people from Sabrina's generation. There's a lot of young Muslim women. For Sabrina, it might seem very few, but for me, compared to what I had, or what I saw, it's a lot more, but it's still not enough, as Sabrina had pointed out. So when I was starting off, my parents thought I was a little crazy, but they were always encouraging. And I knew it was something I wanted to do because I've always liked to talk to people. And I'm always interested in, issues of the day. I actually am an editor, full-time editor now, but I still write a lot of pieces that have to do with Muslims and Islam, because I think a lot of times, as Sabrina said, I'm the only one, or there's only one person or two people in a newsroom that represents Muslims. And I think even though it's a lot better than, even though coverage is a lot better than it was when I was younger and when I was growing up, it's still not perfect. When I was starting off in journalism, or when I was in college, Muslim would still be spelled as Moslem. That was the AP style. And, a lot of Muslims would be like, well, that's not the way you say it. And a lot of things were mispronounced. They still are. But I think that things have gotten better. People at least are trying to understand. I still don't think it's perfect. I'm sure you have heard about the Orlando shooting that happened a couple years ago. And it was really disturbing to see that a lot of journalists were going into the house of the suspect and they were finding like a prayer rug. And they said that that was a sign of his radicalization, or the fact that he went to Saudi Arabia for Hajj, that showed that he was become radicalized. So there's still a lot of ignorance about Islam. So that's why I feel the need to, speak out and talk about, or at least clarify things. I still think that's very important. So even though I'm an editor, I still write columns, and I'll share some of those columns with you to talk about why I have to bring up these subjects. Because a lot of times I feel like Islamophobia isn't treated the same way as, let's say, anti-Semitism or other kinds of racism. People kind of often brush it off. And I think it's important to point out why Islamophobia is really dangerous. And I think that's why it's important to have Muslim journalists into the newsroom. As a journalist who's been working for a long time, like Sabrina, I keep my fast while I'm covering events. There's been times where I'm covering something. I clearly remember in my 20s, when I was starting off, I was doing an event with the mayor of Chicago, and I had a date in my jacket. And while he's talking, I took it out and popped it into my mouth. And people were probably a little confused, and I started drinking water furiously. But through the years, people still get confused about what specifically Muslims do during Ramadan or how it changes. People are always confused. They're like, wait, isn't Ramadan in December, or isn't Ramadan in July? And that's why I actually did a story last year, and I'm going to share some of the pieces that I did. Ramadan has been very difficult for a lot of people in Chicago. Like Sabrina, I usually break iftar with my family, not every day, obviously, because when Ramadan is in the winters or even in the spring, you're kind of finishing up on deadline. But on the weekends, I'd get together with my family, and my mom makes all these different things for iftar, and we eat. And so last year, I didn't spend any time with my family for iftar because it was the height of the pandemic. This year, most of my family was vaccinated. Me and my husband were half vaccinated. So we were able to go and have iftar at my mom's place over the weekend. I still used to go to Tarawih at our mosque, and I haven't been doing that since the pandemic. My brother is, he has a job, but he's actually the president of our mosque to show you how incestuous everything is. And he actually just sent out a note the other day saying that we have social distancing Tarawih right now, but somebody got COVID. And so he had to announce that to everyone because people really wanted to come this year. So they allowed it for about 150 to 200 people with social distancing. So Ramadan has been very difficult. My friends at work do ask me about it. I think that's changed. Many, many years ago, when you would mention Ramadan or Eid al-Fitr or Eid al-Adha, people would look at you very confused. I think now it's interesting great that we have, paraphernalia that has to do with Ramadan. There's Ramadan decorations. So I think people do pay attention to that more than before. Now I'm going to try to do share a couple stories just so bear with me a little. I'm not like the most technological savvy person here. So I'll share a couple stories with you to show the examples of just covering Muslims and Islam and just how it ties into everyday events and news events. So, 1 second. So can you see my story? It's about, it should be the one about using a lota during Ramadan, or during the pandemic, not during Ramadan. And it's basically a story that I did last year because there was toilet papers running out in the United States. So people were complaining. So I don't know what you guys call it in Indonesia, but in Urdu we call it lota. So this is what you use when you go to the bathroom. And so I did a story on how everybody should use the lota and how a lot of people in the Muslim world use the lota. So this is one of the stories that I did. A lot of people never heard of that. I actually got a email from a German publication asking me if they could share the picture of the lota that I had in my story for this environmental newspaper. So that's pretty interesting. Let me share another story that I did. Are you guys familiar with baseball? I don't know if that's something that people watch in Indonesia, but I did a story on the Chicago Cubs. The Chicago Cubs are a big baseball team, and they're owned by the Ricketts family, and they are Trump supporters. Now, the father of this family had turned out that he wrote a lot of emails that were very Islamophobic. So I wrote a story about being a Cub fan and how hard it is to be a Cub fan as a Muslim. So this is the story that I did. A lot of it made front page news, so I was happy about that, so people can understand why I specifically was offended. And last year, I also did a story about Ramadan and how hard it would be during the pandemic. So let me see if I can grab that story. 1 second. Oh, I cannot seem to find it right now, but I will find it in a second. But I can explain. I basically did a story on Ramadan and how important it was for Muslims to gather during iftar and Eid celebrations. And I talked about how it will be difficult this year because we won't be able to hug each other. We won't be able to, share iftar. And then the most recent story I did is actually about this resolution that came before the City Council of Chicago. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what's happening in India. There's the political group there is called the BJP, and one of their targets are Muslims. So there was a city council resolution that a lot of Indians in the Chicago area proposed to the councilmen, the aldermen in Chicago, to basically denounce what's happening in India. And then there was another group of Indians who felt that that was offensive, and they basically talked about why it was offensive. And this became a really controversial issue. And what happened was I can share with you the story. The city council resolution was actually shot down, but it was a very controversial issue. And a lot of people didn't know why it was important. And it was something that I had to share with my community about why it was important. So I will show this story that I did about why it was important for us to speak out against such dictatorship and such anti-Muslim, violence that's been happening in India. A lot of people don't know what's happening in India. So when I presented this, a lot of people were able to at least learn about what's happening, because a lot of times people don't understand what's happening around the world. That's one of the things about the United States that isn't one of the best things about us. So just to give you an example, so that's why even though I'm an editor and I've actually specialized in criminal courts reporting that had nothing to do with Muslims and Islam, every once in a while there's the issue that I feel is important, or I feel that the other reporters who don't have the same background as me need to cover or need to explain why it's important to speak out. So every time I see something like that, I always feel like, okay, maybe somebody will say something. But if I don't see it, I go out and speak out. As Sabrina was saying, that there's a lot more Muslims in the media than there was before in the United States. There's still not enough. So I do think it's important for us to encourage the youth and encourage students who are in college that are, if they are interested in, changing the way people think, the perceptions, is to join the media and to speak out. I think that's really important. So thank you very much.
Yay. Speaking about representation in media, do you think that it's because of the opportunity or it's because of the Muslim communities, especially young generation, are not very interested to become a journalist? Because when I was a kid, I didn't want to be a journalist. Maybe next time you can answer
I was going to say, the money isn't really that great, especially for print reporters. So I can see why people don't want to go into journalism. But I think there's a lot more young Muslims interested in journalism than there was before. We actually have an informal group in Chicago of Muslim journalists, and there's about 25 of us, which it's not the best, but just the fact that we have that representation, it's a lot better than it was before. Because when I started off, it was me, and there was another woman named Noreen Amatullah who now teaches in Toronto. But she covered her hair, she did hijab. A lot of people were confused by that, and a lot of people have perceptions of what Muslim women are. But it's definitely changed. There's a lot more women, even with hijab, who work in the US media.
Okay, thank you, Rumana. And next, Mania Iman Santoso. Over to you, Mania. Are you ready?
Thank you, Yayan.
Oh.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So on my presentation, unlike Sabrina and Rumana, I will be focusing more on my work as to tell the story about Islam to the Indonesian audience. So before I start with my presentation, I would like to start with my background, a little bit about my background. So if you can start with the slide, please. Okay. The reason why I start with my background, because I want to put into context how I position myself as a Muslim journalist in the US. So this is the pictures of my big family. As you can see, there are 3 women wearing hijab. Those are my cousins from my father's side. Next slide, please. And this is my immediate family. The left pictures is when they are celebrating Chinese New Year's, and the right side is when they're celebrating Christmas. So from those 3 pictures, you can tell that I come from a diverse family. I have a diverse background. My family is Indonesian-born Chinese, and Chinese descent is a minority in Indonesia. I'm the first one in my family, the first generation in my family who migrated to the US. So for me, being diverse and being minority at the same time is something that I'm familiar with when I came to this country, and in some ways it also helps me in doing my work as a journalist. Next slide, please. Now we are talking a little bit about Muslim in America. How many are they? So you can see from those 2 numbers, the numbers of Muslim in US is only like 3.45 million Muslim in all ages. And since I cover story about Indonesian diaspora, the total numbers that I got from the Indonesian embassy, the estimation numbers is like 142,000. So it is obvious that either Muslim and Indonesian diaspora, they are minority in the US. Can we go to the next slide, please? So those the numbers, the minority is actually the challenges for me in doing my job, because it's not easy to find the source, to find the topics for the Indonesian audience. The source are not abundant. The source, especially the source that has a news value. So for me, I've been doing this work for 15 years. So I started building my networkings, started small, and now I think I get quite extensive sources on my list. And thanks to the social media, I can keep adding the sources for my topic. Can we go to the next slide, please? And the interesting topic for the Indonesian audience, I have some here. The first one is like growing of Islam in the US. So when we're talking about the growing of Islam, it's not only about the numbers, but also about how Islam becomes the everyday part of the American life. So on these pictures, you can see on the upper right, this is when I did the interview with Indonesian diaspora in Indiana. His name is Kustim Wibowo. Pak Kustim is a lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania, and he's also a treasurer for Islamic Center of Indiana, Pennsylvania. So we did the interview with him because the center just built a first mosque in Indiana. Indiana is a small city close to Pittsburgh. And the pictures at the bottom is Nining Sutarjo. Ibu Nining is a research seat analyst at the University of Kentucky in Lexington. I think she's the only Indonesian female Muslim working in that lab for that university. Can we go to the next slide, please? And on this slide, you can see the pictures on the upper right and upper left and the right side. Those pictures are the cooking class that conducted by Indonesian Muslim Family Association in Atlanta, Georgia. So I did the story in 2019. So that organization, they had this cooking class every month in the local county library. They invited the American people nearby to come to the class, and they learn. They teach them how to cook Indonesian street food. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? On this slide, on the upper side, you see this young lady. She's from San Francisco Bay Area. She's the second generation Muslim, and she's a software engineer working for Adobe. And in her spare time, she also volunteered her time to teach girls, high school students, with the project Girls Who Code. And can we go to the next slide? So the next question is, how do I deliver the story about Islam in the US? I start with the interview. So the interview for me is not just trying to get data or facts, but also to get information, some things that come deeper from their heart. Or kalau in bahasa Indonesia, we call it interview dengan hati gitu kira-kira ya kalau dalam bahasa Indonesia. So on this page, I give you like some soundbite that I quote from my interview. The first one is from Henny Kusumawati. Henny is the program coordinator of that cooking class that I mentioned before. And as a background, all the ibu-ibu, the women that teach that at that cooking class, they're all wearing hijab. So in that interview, Henny said that as a minority, she just wanted the people who come to the class to feel comfortable being close to them. And after like several classes, and she said that she felt that the people now feel comfortable with them. Even one of the participants came to her and jokingly said that, oh, actually you all can smile. Maybe because she thinks that women wearing hijab are a very private person. Can we go to the next slide, please? On this slide, I did the interview with a father and daughter, Black Muslim American. They both teach silat, pencak silat, Indonesian martial arts to the American people. The daughter is Sakina Ahmad. Sakina has been practicing silat since she was 4, and she's been competing in many tournaments, martial art and silat across the nation, and also internationally. So if while it is a common scene in Indonesia to see the female pesilat competing in the tournament wearing hijab, that's not the case for Sakina. So in that interview, Sakina said that she just wanted to encourage a girl or women wearing hijab to feel proud of themselves and their religion. The next slide. This is the last slide, so I promise you to make it quick. So all in all, the experience for me as a Muslim journalist telling the story about Islam in America has been an enlightenment, enriching my knowledge, and as I'm still learning about Islam. And also it's been a privilege for me to hear the first-hand story about America from the eyes of Muslim immigrants. And last, maybe I become a better ping pong player. Yeah, I think that's all from me. I give the time back to Yayan. Thank you.
Thank you, Bania. And you remind me of my experience when I was at university. My friends were really surprised that I watch football. And one of them also asked me, do you drive? Yes, of course, I drive. Something like that. Maybe I have to explain more. And you are a good example of diversity in Indonesia. I'm so in love with you. And now the next is we are going to read questions. Most of them are about the challenges. From Haliza, during work, what challenges were you faced and how did you overcome them? And how are you as a journalist been able to cope with them? Maybe I can give the first opportunity to Sabrina, speaking about challenges.
Thank you so much. That's a very good question. And I think we face a lot of challenges, of course, as journalists. And if I'm going to reflect a little bit more as a Muslim, I think Ramana had spoken about how, it's been a bit more difficult in the past few years. When, of course, as newsrooms, we all had to grapple with the candidacy and then the presidency of Donald Trump. And it is obviously true that he made a lot of anti-Muslim statements during the course of his political career. And I think that, for me, I never really felt like a Muslim at first when I was doing my job, right? I was just a journalist. And when you start to hear more anti-Muslim statements coming from someone who was running for president, then you realize, okay, well, this is something that affects the community that I belong to. And I remember in the 2016 campaign, I remember very specifically, it was December 7th, because it was the day before my birthday. Happy birthday to me. That was when Donald Trump said that he wanted to ban all Muslims from coming to the United States. That was an actual proposal for his campaign. And, this was something that I felt like, of course, a lot of the media did think it was outrageous, but I don't think people actually took it seriously. I think that, I don't think they really understood what it means to say something like that. And, there were other moments in the 2016 election as well. I had pulled up an article of mine about one of the candidates, Ben Carson, who was also running against Donald Trump for the Republican nomination. And he said that he did not think a Muslim should ever be allowed to be president of the United States, right? So these are challenges, I think, that I faced, and I know other Muslim colleagues faced, where you're not supposed to make the story about yourself. You're not supposed to be, you have to be careful. You're not supposed to be biased. You have to be objective. You're just supposed to stick to the facts. But this is where the facts are actually posing a bit of a challenge for you, because the fact is some of these candidates are making anti-Muslim comments and they have a very real impact. So when, for example, the Republican candidate Ben Carson said that he didn't think a Muslim should ever be allowed to be president, I remember I came home from work. We had a family gathering. It actually probably was, around Ramadan, actually, if I think about it. And we had I know my niece, at the time, she was 6 years old, my cousin's daughter. She came up to me at our family gathering and she said, is it true that we are not allowed to be president? Because she was only 6 years old, right? So she's watching the news and everyone was talking about what he had said, the candidate, that Muslims should not be allowed to be president. She's only 6. So she thinks, so I'm not allowed to be president. This is the kind of impact, right, that one statement can have on a little Muslim girl who is watching at home. So for me, it was challenging because I had to kind of go back to work. I had to go back to the newsroom and say, we have to be a lot more clear in writing about these events. And I'm not just saying it because I'm Muslim. I'm saying it because this is, our job. We have to be truthful. We have to talk about impact. We have to talk about consequences. You can't just put a quote and say, okay, that's it. Everyone can interpret it how they want to interpret it. So these are challenges, I think, that have come up time and again. And I think they've become more and more prevalent in recent years, more common in recent years, because we've seen more of this Islamophobia. I think once again, of course, it was around in a post 9/11 immediate aftermath era. But now I think in recent years, you've seen another rise in, bias against Muslims and perceptions that I think a lot of us, the other panelists, are the ones who have to kind of change. I think hopefully at some point it won't just be the Muslims who have to speak up, right? Or actually overcome these challenges. We need to educate our peers, our non-Muslim peers inside of these newsrooms, so that they actually also react the same way next time someone makes an anti-Muslim comment. It's not just us who has to come say, hey, we should cover it this way. They will think themselves, we should cover it this way, not because Sabrina said so, because we all collectively know that, this is a challenge that we're facing and something we have to overcome together.
And apart from the challenges, don't forget to tell us the story, sweet story about memorable moment during covering the White House. Okay, maybe I go to Rumana. What kind of challenges do you have, Rumana, and how did you overcome them?
I think we still have challenges, as I said in my presentation and Sabrina mentioned. When I was talking about the story that I did on the resolution that was proposed to City Council, this was a non-binding resolution saying that what's happening in India is wrong. So I did this piece as I presented during my presentation. And there was a lot of people, there's a lot of people who support the right-wing Indian government in the United States, and that affects a lot of policies in the United States and just the way people are presenting themselves. So a lot of people were sending me hate mail and telling me that things aren't happening in India, Muslims aren't being discriminated against. And this one group that was really against the resolution, my editor told me he really liked my column. This is before the resolution was presented to City Council. And so one of the tactics, this resolution wasn't presented by any Muslims specifically. It was a diverse group of religious groups. But the people who were against the resolution kept pounding and telling everybody that this was proposed by the Council on American Islamic Relations, and they called them a terrorist group. And that was just the strategy they were using. Anyway, I posted my column, I got a lot of hate mail. And then what happened was this group kept sending emails to my editor, and then they ended up buying an ad. And my editor did not consult me. He called me when I was off and said, hey, I was going to talk to you about something. But then he goes, oh, forget it, it's your day off. Anyway, the next day, this gentleman who's been a supporter of the BJP, he sends me a screenshot of our newspaper, and it turns out that this group that supports the right-wing government in India bought an ad against the resolution. And the resolution had misfacts in it. It said that CARE, which is an organization that supported the resolution, is a terrorist organization, and that they proposed this resolution. And there was just a lot of misinformation in it. And, they basically said that there's nothing happening in India, everything is fine. So I saw the ad, I was furious. This is just about a month ago. I called my editor, who I'm friends with, but I know pretty well. And I said, how could you print this ad? It has misfacts in it. And I go, it's one thing if there wasn't misfacts in it, but it has a lot of, it's totally erroneous. And I just think it's offensive. And I said that if there was any other group that was being discriminated against, maybe Christians or Jewish people, would we run an ad from people who were denying that it was happening? And he's like, yeah, you bring a good point. And I said, well, it's too late now. He's like, yeah, I won't run any ads from this group anymore. I'm like, well, the damage is done. So I feel like people don't really understand that if they're not Muslim, they don't know many people who are Muslim, or don't understand that these comments and all this misstatements about Muslims can really be damaging. And like I said, the resolution ended up failing because this group was so powerful. And even a non-binding resolution just saying what's happening in India is wrong couldn't pass the City Council in Chicago, which presents itself as a progressive city council. So it is frustrating sometimes. One of the benefits is that I do have a lot of reporters, and my colleagues do ask me questions. I tell them, please ask me questions. Or, they ask me, does this make sense? Does it sound right? Is this offensive when they write things? And I do appreciate that. And I think that needs to be done. So there's still a lot of frustration. I still, cringe when I see certain words or certain stories about Muslims. So I think just more people need to be educated, and more Muslims need to be in the newsroom. With, the George Floyd killing last year, there's been a lot of discussion and debate about the importance of diversity in newsrooms and that how it's been lacking. And that's one of the things that I always find funny or interesting is that, newsrooms and journalists, they always call out other individuals for their lack of diversity. They call out the government. And I said, our newsrooms, they tend to be mostly white. And it's changing a little, but I do feel the George Floyd killing did kind of have at least people discussing conversations. I've been pushing for diversity since, I started off in journalism. For a long time, I still do, and I still help with our selection of interns. And I was part of the Asian American Journalists Association for a while on the board. And I would try to look for people who were, promising young journalists. They didn't have to necessarily be Muslim, but I know one time Asma Thareen, who now works for NPR, was applying for one of our jobs, and we were going to hire her at the Chicago Sun-Times. She ended up not getting the internship, but she's at NPR doing wonderful things. And I remember just looking at her resume and being like, wow, she definitely has a future. And I remember feeling bad because we went with someone else. But, it's like I always looked out for those names. If I saw someone that was promising or looked like really good on paper and were, had showing promise, I do tend to look for, the diverse voices, and not necessarily Muslims. But when I do see a young Muslim individual, I will definitely try to push for them and try to mentor them, or at least try to see if they can, get an internship, get a job, entry-level job. And that's why I think that's very important for journalists who are established, Muslim journalists who are established, at least to be a mentor to a lot of these younger students and journalists who are just starting off.
Thank you, Romana. And now, Mbak Nia?
Yeah, for me,
Kind of challenges.
As I mentioned on my presentation, that since I report about Islam and also about Muslim community to the Indonesian audience, and the numbers is limited in the United States, so my challenge is how I find the stories. I mean the sources and the topics. That's the most challenging thing for me. Another challenge may be physical challenge. It's not really a challenge for me because I was lucky, because when I started fasting here in the United States, it was on winter. So I learned gradually how to control myself when working while I'm fasting. And I think my background gives me more advantage for me in doing my work, and sometimes give a surprise to my sources, because my first name is Maria. So when I called my sources, I'm doing this work going to the mosque, interview the Muslim ustaz or ustaza. Sometimes they get surprised with my name, but I think that gives me an advantage too. I can work in many angles about the story that I covered. So unlike Romana and Sabrina, they are more into politics. I'm more into stories about diaspora. So I think that's it for me.
Yeah, thank you. And the next question is quite interesting. Riyad Pertiwi, and she asked whether you get some kind of protection just like any other journalist. And also how the American people treat you as a Muslim journalist.
Well, I think, it's a good question. Protection, we do not get. I don't get it. I know most journalists don't get protection. It takes quite an extraordinary thing. I think a major threat would obviously warrant a newsroom to give you protection. I mean, sometimes I have been scared myself because you're out in my job, on the campaign trail. One thing that's really cool about this job is that you get to travel a lot. You get to go to different places. You get to meet lots of different people, and there are people that you would maybe never meet before. There are places that maybe you wouldn't go if it wasn't for your job. And so it takes you out of your bubble. It takes you out of your comfort zone. But then that means sometimes, when I'm interviewing voters, especially, sometimes they don't know I'm Muslim. So they are saying things about, their feelings or their thoughts. And I'm thinking like, okay, this is a little awkward because I don't think they know that I'm Muslim. And so, in those moments you do wonder you were about safety. But of course, I think overall, I think for us, what I would say is most people that I meet, to the second part of that question, are incredibly nice people. And I would say actually that, even sometimes when I've met voters, for example, who have like a anti kind of Muslim bias or something, when I think it's because they don't know. They are uninformed. They don't have the, kind of awareness. And I found that if you try to talk to them like human to human, they are willing to listen. And I found that myself, because sometimes if I'm interviewing a voter and they start saying something about Muslims, and then they are kind of, I think they have a moment where they say, wait a minute, where are you from? And I tell them, and I say, let's talk. Tell me why you feel that way. let's talk about, what are your thoughts about Muslims and why? And most people, I like to believe that most people are good. They just need more education, and then they need more awareness. And on that note, I will tell you one thing, because you want a nice memory. You said you wanted like a sweet memory. So I will say that, two things real quick is, one, I remember one day I woke up and I had all these texts on my phone, text messages from my colleagues in the media. And I was wondering what had happened. And what happened is that, the former president, Trump, had retweeted on Twitter. He had shared some Islamophobic video on YouTube. It was a big story. It was a group that was based in the UK called Britain First, and they were known as Islamophobic, and he had shared their content. So it was a controversy here in the US. It was all over the news. And it was not my Muslim friends who were texting me. It was my non-Muslim colleagues in America, from all different, not even just from where I worked at the time I was at The Guardian. It was from all different newsrooms. I had like 10, 12, 15 messages from my fellow colleagues in the media saying, hey, we're thinking of you. Are you, I hope you're okay. If you need anything, let us know. And I think that tells you a little bit about how, there has been some change, and there has been more support, I think, for Muslims and other minorities who might feel marginalized or targeted. And there has been, also like Ramana and I were all talking about, like more, as there's more Muslims now in the media, even if there's not enough, people are starting to recognize, what this all might be for us, what our experience might feel like. And another really good memory was, I remember I was at a campaign rally in 2016, and it was actually during Ramadan. So you were saying, what's a good memory for you? I met this family. They came up to me. There was a couple, like a husband and wife, and they walked up to me and they introduced themselves, and they said, oh, we've seen, your segments. And they were actually refugees from Syria. So they had come to the United States with refugee status, and they were very happy. They were saying to see a Muslim talking about politics and on the news. And they were just saying that they, hope that I keep going, that I keep doing what I do. And for me, it was I think it will always stick with me. It will always be a memory I have, because, for me, I'm thinking that this refugee family has arrived in America, and they've arrived at a time when maybe they don't know, do they feel welcome here or not? And they arrive and they turn on the TV and they see a Muslim. I think that made them feel good. It made them feel like a little bit at home. So I think that's a really sweet memory that sticks with me. And it happened to be during Ramadan. So, a time of reflection, and a time where I think it had even more of an impact on me, and something I'll always take with me. And again, it's a sign of progress and a sign of change.
And what about you, Rumana?
Yeah, I was going to say, we don't necessarily have protection. We don't have bodyguards watching us. But one of the things that's nice is I do have, even though I disagree with some of my editors, and I kind of get frustrated because they don't understand everything, they do have my back. When I'm, when I want to write about something that has to do with Muslims and Islam, or something that I want to correct that I've seen, they've been pretty good about my editorial. The head of the editorial board always tells me, he's like, I'll take anything you write. Even when I did that column about, how Muslims use the bathroom, he was a little like hesitant about, he's like, what does that mean? And he goes, that sounds a little, would it be okay for the paper? And he goes, I trust you, just write it. And he ended up liking the column. So I do have that support. When former President Barack Obama was in power, I remember getting, I field a lot of phone calls when I'm actually in the newsroom. And I remember getting calls from people talking about how Barack Obama is a Muslim. And it's funny because people don't realize that they're talking to another Muslim on the other end. So, I never say anything. Sometimes I might say, like, you're talking to another Muslim, FYI. But it's interesting. Whenever I write about Muslims or Islam, I always get somebody, saying something anti-Muslim, but I also get a lot of supporting, encouraging mail as well. One time I did a column, I think I actually did a column on Barack Obama, because when he was running for president, there was a lot of controversy because they said that he went to a madrasa. We pronounce it madrasa, it's pronounced differently. And, he was raised in Indonesia for a while, as many of you know. And so he did go to a school that had Islamic studies, but, everybody wants to make madrasas seem like they're all controversial when they not necessarily are. And so I talked to a specialist from Indonesia and talked to other individuals, and I did a column on that. And I remember getting a lot of hate mail about that. I also did a column on Barack Obama's middle name, Hussein, because it's my last name. And I remember getting a mail from this woman, and she told me to go back to where I came from. And she said, America is only for Americans. And I might have responded to her once or twice and said, I'm American. And then, she kind of pushed back. I pushed back once or twice. And maybe about a few months later, I got mail from someone. It was a handwritten letter. And they talked about how they were embarrassed about how they behaved with me and apologized to me. So it was a really nice apology letter. So sometimes even when you have those people who attack you and don't understand you, they do realize, that they're speaking from maybe fear, and it turns into hatred. And so you do, I think that's one of the things that's really important about journalism, and that's something that you see is that you just being out there and dispelling what people think of a Muslim or a Muslim woman. I think it really does help. It breaks down a lot of barriers. I mean, before people would think, if a Muslim woman is not doing hijab, that she doesn't care about Islam, or, only certain people who are Muslims who don't care about the religion are the good ones. So it's like, that's why it's important to show that there's a diversity even within our community. So having, there's not just South Asian Muslims, there's a lot of Middle Eastern Muslims, there's African American Muslim journalists. So it's important. I think that diversity is important to get out there. And I think once people see who you are, it does change a lot of minds. And you might not even be talking about something that has to do with Islam or Muslims. You could be covering something that has nothing to do with that. But they look at your name and they know that you're not like the average Joe. And, they kind of put two and two together and they might start asking you questions. So I do think just having yourself out there, putting yourself out there does help.
Okay, thank you. And Mania?
Yeah, the same as Sabrina and Rumana. We don't have any protection at the office. And I think if we are talking about my look, I think will be more targeting about for the Asian hate crime than the Muslim hate crime. But I would like to share some stories about my source that I did with these two Indonesian diaspora. So I went to this small city in Kentucky. I interviewed this husband and wife. They are both lecturer at the local community college. The wife wearing hijab, and it's a small city in Kentucky, and the state around that city is called Bible Belt. So obviously they are minority there. So I asked this question to them: do you feel comfortable living in this small city as a Muslim minority? And they said to me, the answer is quite surprising for me, because they said that yeah, they're okay. And even their kids, their son, can ask a time break every Friday to go to the Friday Jumu'ah prayer. And why you can do that? Because you are minority here. And they said that the key for them is being open, accepting the differences, and also being active in the community. So doing volunteering work for the community, so the community will accept them. So I think, yeah, that's my experience with my sources. But for me myself, I never received threat email or some things. Yeah, alhamdulillah until now. So yeah, that's it for me. Yeah.
Okay. The next question is from Hayrunisa. I think this is about personal experience or personal. It is a kind of personal, because she asked, have you ever felt insecure? So this is about insecurity because you are being a minority, because you are being a female journalist, something like that. What about that?
Oh gosh, this is a great question. All the time. I think that we're all human beings and in a very tough and competitive profession. And so there are a lot of insecurities. And I think, I'm glad that this person asked this question, because if I could go back to my younger self, I know I'm not a senior veteran journalist, but I'm also not an entry-level journalist. I'm somewhere in the middle, right? So if I could go back and tell my younger self one thing, it would be to be confident and to believe in yourself and to never doubt what you're capable of. And I would especially say that to myself and everyone else, you know, who around me who's a young woman, because I think that girls, women are especially made to feel like they are inferior and not capable of as much, when in fact we're capable of so much more, if you ask me. And I think that, you said whether it's as a Muslim or a minority, I think as both, especially in this country, because we've said there's just, you're one of a few, right? And so you look around and you don't see other people like yourself, even if you see a few more. And you do have those moments where you think, am I going to make it to the next level? Or will I ever make it to the next level? Because, I just think that there's still not enough hiring and promoting what, of people who are minorities and of women, of course, in terms of putting them in senior positions or in leadership. We still have so much work to do. And honestly, even when we were talking about discrimination, like when I was younger, I mean, I'll say on a personal level, in one of my earlier jobs, we had a company dinner, and they ordered for the whole, for everyone. It was a seated dinner, and they bring you your, whatever your meal. And they didn't think to ask about dietary restrictions, like what can you eat, what can you not eat. And so it was a formal dinner with like people around us, so you didn't want to make a scene, and they brought me the salad and it had pork in it. And obviously I don't eat pork, so I had to politely send it back. And one of the people at the company, this is this was many years ago, so I won't say which company, one of the people who worked at the company, she complained to my boss and said, Sabrina shouldn't have sent that back because in front of everyone, it looked bad. It made us look bad. And I was only 23 years old. So I was right out of university, and I didn't speak up for myself. I didn't know what to say. I said, I'm sorry, I don't eat pork, I'm Muslim. Now, luckily, my boss was a very good mentor and said, you shouldn't have to apologize. We should have asked you if you had any dietary restrictions, if there's anything you can and cannot eat. We should be asking that as a company, right? But that, I think, it stays with me because it's a little bit outside of reporting, but it's about being a Muslim in the workplace too, right? It's not just about your job and how you report. It's about how you're treated inside of your workplace. And I have had to learn over time to advocate for myself. I think all minorities and women especially have to learn to advocate for themselves and to speak up. And so, you have these moments where you think you're a bit insecure and you're afraid to speak up and you're afraid to be your full self. And I've learned over time, and even now sometimes, I hesitate. And so I think my biggest advice, actually, to turn that into a piece of advice, is to never doubt yourself and to speak up for yourself and to advocate for yourself. And if you feel like you're having any doubts, then find a mentor, find someone you look up to, and share with them and learn from them. And I think that is going to be something that will benefit everyone, hopefully, who's listening.
That you are evolving to become you are now. Don't be too hard to yourself. And what about Rumana?
Yeah, I think what Sabrina's saying is totally relatable to me, because when I started off in journalism, I feel like I didn't speak out that much. And through the years, at this point, I'll just say what I feel. I mean, there are some times where I'll be a little more diplomatic about it, but, things come out. When I first got my job at the Sun-Times, it was right after 9/11, and I was at a party maybe about 2 weeks after I got hired, and our boss, who was like the editor-in-chief, made an anti-Muslim comment. He said something about how Muslim men treat Muslim women and how they treat them badly. And I remember trying to say that that's not true, but I felt like I keep thinking about that because I felt like I wasn't aggressive enough. And I feel like whenever somebody said something about Muslims, I could have spoke out more aggressively. I always thought I said something, but I always look back at some of these moments and think, oh, I just should have said something, or said something a little more aggressively. I think one of the good things about this newer generation in general is that people do call other people out, which was not common when I was starting off in the newsroom. We have a people of color Slack channel. We use Slack as a communication tool. And in my newsroom, we have this People of Color Slack channel, and we talk about, issues that we think are important, and we bring these issues to our, editors. And the first time we had a meeting, with our editors, I was very impressed by a lot of questions and a lot of comments that this younger generation had that I didn't have the confidence to say or to talk to my bosses like that. And so I think it's really important, to call people out when there's things that are wrong about certain groups and certain cultures. Muslims, obviously, were one of the groups that, people don't understand completely, but there's also other groups. There's Latino, Americans, African Americans. And then we've seen a spike in Asian, anti-Asian hate crimes. And for a long time, even in my newsroom, people, the thing in America, or the myth in America, is that Asians are the minority. So a lot of times people don't even think that we're people of color. They don't treat us like, I shouldn't say minorities, but people of color. And I should say one good story about that is, like, people don't tend to, they think because you're South Asian that you're not a person of color and you don't have the struggle. There was a job opening once in our newsroom, and they told me they couldn't give it to me because it was for a person of color. And this was like in the early 2000s. And I said, I am a person of color. They're like, no, you're not. So that's one of the things where it's like, I'm not treated like a white person, but I'm not a person of color. So I always bring up that story, and it's something that happened at the Sun-Times. So it's something I think I am speaking out a lot more than I did. I mean, it took a lot of years. I always thought of myself as pretty confident, but then when I look back at some of these like anecdotals or, incidents that happened, I'm like, oh, I should have totally handled that differently. I should have said things differently. So yeah, I think it's something, insecurities are always going to be there, but I think it's good that, our culture is pushing, we have the Me Too movement. We have, people calling people out when there's racial discrimination. So I think that really helps. I think that's boosted a lot of people's confidence and it's pushing us to speak out.
Okay. What about you, Mania? Since you are growing up in Indonesia.
Yeah. Yeah, and I a little bit of background for me. I moved here when in my early 30s, so it's too old for me to learn and to speak English as fluent as the native speaker, of course. And when I was in Indonesia, I worked mostly behind the desk in the management. So when I came here, I had to learn from the beginning how to work with the camera, how to conduct the interview, and also, I feel insecure at the beginning, especially when I had to, to do the interview to report a story about like Islam. Did I give the right question? Because my knowledge about Islam is still limited at the time, but with the time and with the experience, now I feel more comfortable. But my message is, it's human being to feel insecure, but as long as you keep learning, never stop learning, then hopefully you can overcome that feeling.
And the next question is from Ms. Rahakam and Dina Kurniasari. This is about the ritual, religious rituals like praying, prayer or something like that. Do you have any challenges, and how do you perform prayer? Is there any place for that during the daily prayer?
I can go first. I'm one of the things that I probably can find a place to pray, but I don't at work. I have been offered a room, but a lot of times I'm in the middle of things. So what I tend to do is I tend to pray the shortened versions of the prayers when I get home. But I think that if I really pushed for it, I probably could get space in the newsroom, or I probably could have years ago. We have a lot smaller space than we used to before, but if I wanted a room, I probably could. And that's something I should definitely push for. One of the good things about the pandemic is that I'm able to do my prayers at home. I'm not missing anything. So that's one of the things I think I should do better. I don't pray. I know some people do stop and pray. I think there are reporters. Sometimes I have prayed in my car if I'm like out doing something. But in general, I'd rather pray, without hurrying myself. So when I come home, I just do the shortened versions of the prayers for the day.
Yeah, I think that I definitely know what it's like to pray in the car. That's something that you end up doing a lot in this job because you're always on the move. And so, you're just in the parking lot. I think that, sometimes it's nice though, when you go cover events as a journalist where there's other Muslims, like if you're going, for example, to write about an iftar, or if you're going to cover like the Muslim community, because you can pray with them, and that's such a great feeling, honestly, especially in the US, where that's not, of course, something that you come across too much in your job. I do think that there are a lot of employers who have prayer rooms, depending on how large they are. I think a lot of the news organizations don't necessarily have like a designated prayer room, only because there's not that many religious minorities who use it. But if they asked for it, I mean, by law, they would need to provide a space for them, which is good. That's one of the good things about this country. And, I think they would be happy for you to take that time. But it is interesting to think about even just religion in your day-to-day life as a reporter, because I was laughing earlier when Romana said she pulled out the date when she was in the middle of the interview, and then she was chugging her water, because we've all been there, and we've all had these experiences where, I remember I was going to an iftar, and so I had to go get something from my office, and I was wearing my Pakistani clothes head to toe. And I didn't think anyone was going to be there because it was in the evening. I was going, like I said, to an iftar, but I forgot my computer. And a bunch of people were working late, and I walk in like as if I'm dressed for like a wedding. For them, it was like I'm dressed for a wedding, and I'm like, oh, hi, sorry, I'm going to an iftar. This is how we dress for iftar. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. But you have these little moments where it's nice though, I think, because even something as simple as praying, if you say like, I need to step away for a moment, it sparks a conversation, I think. And then your colleagues learn something about you as well. So it's a nice thing when I think you have these little moments at work.
Okay, Mania?
Yeah, maybe I'm lucky because I work for the Indonesian service. So we have a specific room dedicated for praying. So Alhamdulillah, I never miss the pray at the office. And also in the building, we have a room for Jum'ah prayer, because other services also, we have like a Urdu service, Farsi service. So some group of Muslim, they can do the Jum'ah prayer on that room, special room for dedicated for praying. And also, when I travel, of course, sometimes I have to do the praying in the car too, like the others. But my favorite thing is if I cover a mosque, then I can do the praying in the mosque with the other ummah. And now we are working from home, so there is no excuse. Then we have to do the prayer 5 times a day.
And the next question from Zoko it's about your interesting experience during fasting, and how do the people react? Do they respect that you are fasting at the time? Something like that.
I think the big joke we have is there's like a lot of Muslims have shared like a meme like on Instagram and on Twitter where the quote is "not even water," because the big question you get from everyone is, "You're not even allowed to drink water?" And then you're like, "No, I'm not." You have to. You're not supposed to drink water either. You can't chew gum. I'm like, no, you can't chew gum. You're not supposed to. It's just so I think like honestly for us, what we find is more curiosity. I think is people just are really interested in how it works. Like how. But very respectful. I mean, I think sometimes you have to tell people to be themselves because we're not in a Muslim country, right? We're not in a Muslim majority country where everyone is fasting. So, when I've been in these situations in the past, then people often, they think like, okay, we shouldn't eat in front of Sabrina, when it's lunchtime, like, let's go somewhere so that she doesn't have to watch us eat. And I'm like, it's okay. This is our life, right? We're used to it. And we're not in a Muslim majority country. So of course, everyone else is having lunch and going out to get coffee. And I say to them, like, I would let, if you guys are going to go step out to take my colleagues to go get some coffee during the day, like I still want to come with you for the walk, like I want to be able to still, have the camaraderie, the relationship you have with your colleagues. I just won't order anything and you don't have to feel guilty. So I think for me, it's interesting because obviously, you don't have often other Muslims around you. So you're kind of the only one in your office doing it. And so you have to sort of, you think you kind of talk a lot to people about the experience, and you kind of make them understand that they don't have to change their own behavior just because of you. They can be, you'll be yourself, I'll be myself, they'll be themselves. But it's really nice because there's also a Muslim community, I think, of course, where all of us live. We have our respective Muslim communities. And I look forward to, things are getting a little bit more normal as we're all getting vaccinated now. So, even like, my friends and I are vaccinated and we're getting together for iftar on Friday. And I'm very excited because last year we didn't get to do anything together during Ramadan because of the pandemic and COVID. So I think that on a personal note is something that we're looking forward to. And I'm sure everyone in Indonesia as well, it feels a little bit more normal, hopefully this year than last year. So, it's a time where you get to answer a lot of questions and you get to share, I think you get to educate a lot of people around you. And that's really nice.
You remind me of my university year when in UK, my friend was really concerned about me that she said, you get sick, something like that, because of fasting. And Rumana, what about you? Do you have any interesting experience about fasting?
I mean, I the experiences I talked about, like just kind of shoving, food in my mouth. Sometimes, people think that you're going to be eating special foods because I do like eating the Indian iftar that my mom makes. But one time I was breaking my fast at work. This is in the winter, and I had a bag of Cheetos, and I was eating Cheetos and maybe a can of Coke. And, the religion reporter was laughing at me. She goes, "Oh, is that what you eat for iftar?" And I'm like, well, you can eat anything, but, this is what I'm just choosing to eat. And she thought it was very American of me to do, which it was. And as Sabrina mentioned, we don't really experience don't experience everybody celebrating Ramadan or most of the country observing Ramadan. So we've kind of, we celebrate within our own community. And that's one of the things that, all of us in America have done is you find your community. You find, if you live, in Chicago, it was like a group of family friends that we have. And I'm still friends with all these individuals to this day. And we get together and have iftar when we can. When I'm in the newsroom, people are usually curious, and they're also worried about eating in front of me, making me hungry. And I always tell them, well, psychologically, I don't. Usually I get hungry by 1 o'clock, but I'm like, you don't. It's not really that tempting. Even if you eat cookies in front of me or cake, I'll be fine. And so I always tell them that. So in general, my experience has been a pretty positive one. I do get a lot of questions. And sometimes people tell me to drink, and I always have to remind them, as Sabrina said, no, I can't drink water either. It's a total fast. And, sometimes people, when you tell them, yeah, Ramadan lasts for 30 days, they think you're fasting for 30 days. And then you have to explain to them, no, it's from sunrise to sunset. And so, yeah, it's a lot of explaining, but I feel like the explanations through the years have gotten more limited, because I think people do know what Ramadan is now. I mean, even Party City, which is a store that has like balloons and decorations, they have Ramadan decorations now. I think there's different organizations that you can find on Amazon, businesses that have Ramadan decorations and Eid decorations. So, there's still a lot of confusion. When we celebrate Eid al-Fitr and we're disagreeing about when we're going to have Eid, I think that's still a little hard to explain. When I take off work, I go, well, Eid might be on Tuesday or Wednesday, but I'm not sure. So I might have to take Tuesday off, or I might have to take Wednesday off. So that gets still a little confusing to our work colleagues. But yeah, it is interesting. I've seen kind of the changes through the years. It's still not, people don't have all the answers yet, but in general, I think I have a pretty positive experience for Ramadan. Coronavirus definitely changed the way we celebrated Eid this year. I celebrated just with my immediate family. We all had masks on, and then we went outside. This year, we're all going to be vaccinated, but we're not going to have a community event. Growing up, and even now we have these big Eid events where everybody meets together and, prays the Eid namaz or the Eid prayers. And so now this year also we're going to be doing it, everybody individual is going to be doing it at home. And, we like to, people were always confused when they saw us too, because they see us all dressed up for Eid and we look like we're going to a wedding with all this heavy makeup on at like 9 a.m. But, they get a little confused about that. But it's in general, it's a good experience. And, even though Ramadan can be a struggle sometimes, you get really tired. That's what happens to me. I feel really sleepy by the end of the day. It's just like you miss it when it's over. I tend to miss it when it's over.
You forget to mention about how is it when you are fasting during summer. Wow.
Oh yeah, then it's been a little challenging the last when it's hot. I bet it's harder for people in Indonesia. I always think about my relatives in India, like those who don't have air conditioning. I'm sitting in air conditioning sometimes, and they're not. So it can be pretty hot and challenging, for sure.
And what about you, Mbania?
Yeah, as you know that I work for Indonesian service. So in the service, even though not all of us are Muslim, but they are familiar with fasting with Ramadan, so it's not a big problem for me. So if I can share you my personal experience, not my professional experience. So I'm a running enthusiast. So I joined a running club here in my county. So we train together every week, sometimes 2-3 times a week. And during Ramadan, usually I just disappear. So at the first year, they are curious what happened with Maria. They called me Maria. Why suddenly she disappeared? So for a month. So I have to explain to them that I cannot run because I cannot eat. I cannot drink from in the morning from sahur until iftar. At the beginning they don't understand, but now they know. If I disappeared, it's Ramadan. Maria won't train with us.
Okay. And I think the next question is about, do you see any particular benefits for being a female Muslim journalist, especially in doing reporting, seeking news sources, or interviewing people?
I would say, a couple of things. Obviously, I think there's a great benefit, and we've talked a lot about diversity and representation. So, of course, that continues to be one of the most important elements of this for me, because you hope that there, are more Muslims and young women and who look, and see you and realize that they could also pursue a career in journalism, that it's something they could see themselves in you, right? And so I think that is something that is so important to I'm sure all of us. And I mean, I think the other piece that's important as well, though, is to honestly demonstrate just how normal we are as Muslims. The thing about me is when it's appropriate, I talk about some of these issues, around being Muslim, and I, if something comes up in the news specifically about Muslims, then yes, okay, I might sometimes share some perspective because I'm Muslim. But most days I'm not writing about, being Muslim. I'm writing about national politics. I'm writing the same stories everyone else is writing about President Biden and the White House. When I'm on CNN, I'm sitting there with all my other peers and we're just talking about whatever is happening in the news and the latest in politics. And I think it's important for people to see that, especially in the United States, because they see that, hey, we're just like your other neighbors, right? There's nothing different actually about us. Obviously, there might be some differences in culture, but for the most part, we're all Americans and we're all just here in the US, living here as residents and doing exactly what the rest of you do. And I think it's important for people to actually also see that normalcy. So the more that you see Muslims and Muslim women, but just, I think, Muslims more broadly in other fields, whether it's journalism or whether it's entertainment or whether it's music or whether it's business, I think the more people will actually see us for who we really are, and to understand that we're actually out there making a living like everyone else and contributing to society like everyone else. And so that's something that I also think is a very important part of what it is that we do.
Okay, what about you, Rumana?
Yeah, I agree with what Sabrina was saying. A couple of years ago, my junior high librarian sent me an email and she said, "Are you the same Romana Hussein I had many years ago?" And then, we kind of went back and forth. I said, "Yeah, it's me." And then she asked me to speak to her classroom. And my school, when I was younger, wasn't super diverse, but it was somewhat diverse, but it's a lot more diverse than it was before. And there was a lot of Muslim girls who were in the class when I spoke. And, a lot of them asked me questions after I did a presentation and what it's like to be a journalist. And after I was done, the librarian, my former librarian and teacher came up to me and she said, a lot of these young girls never really talk that much, or I never heard them speak as much as they did before. So that's why representation really is important, because people see you and then, they start asking questions and they see that it can be done. I'm not saying I'm the best journalist in the world, but, I was able to do it. People told me it was going to be really difficult. They said, I remember when I started off in journalism, people told me it was like being a rock star. Like, it was very difficult to do. Not everybody gets to do it. It's very competitive. And yeah, it is very competitive, but I don't think it's as hard as being a rock star. But I think it does, people do see you. A lot of people, who have the same background as you see you. And then, they realize that this is something that can be done. I think also what's also important is that a lot of Muslim organizations obviously don't trust the media. A lot of Muslims don't trust the media because of the misinformation and the kind of reporting that has been done on Muslims. I think when people see that, there's a Muslim on staff or that they know you, I think a lot of organizations and groups do come out and speak to you and they tell you. A lot of Muslim people, I'm from Chicago, so I do definitely know a lot of people. A lot of people reach out to me and tell me, like, tips about, stories that are happening in the community. And then, they feel like they can talk to someone and they feel like it's someone you can trust. So I think that definitely helps in terms of the Muslim community. I think it makes people more confident. And when they tell you a story, they realize that, you might not be looking at it with the same lens as some other people will. So I think that does help, because I think it's very, very important for Muslim people to get out there and put our stories out there. Because I think often, like years ago, even now, it's like when you see a panel discussion on Islam, it's like 4 people, none of them were Muslims. And, they're talking about, different issues about the Middle East, and there's nobody that looks like they're from the Middle East or is from the Middle East. So, just having that name out there, I think it helps. It just having the diversity out there helps, and just pushing for that diversity helps. So I think it's important, and I think it does make Muslims go out and tell their story, because I think it's our story to tell, not someone else's.
Yeah, okay. What about you, Mbak Nia?
Yeah, I agree with them that I'm happy if there are more female journalists or Muslim journalists that coming out. But to get the benefit as a female, as a Muslim journalist, I think I like to be known from my skill, my experience. That is matters than to be known as a female or Muslim journalist. And also, diversity is more important for me than being categorized as a female or Muslim journalist. Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, do you have anything to add, Sabrina, Romana, or Mania, before we are closing? Because there are still so many questions, but it could be forever.
Just wanted to say thank you so much for this opportunity. I mean, as we talk about representation and the importance of having more Muslims and Muslim women in the media, you've given us a platform to talk about the importance of the issue. And we hope that, everyone who's thinking about a career in journalism pushes themselves and pursues it, and, doesn't hesitate to reach out to the people that they look up to for advice and guidance in those moments of doubt. So, that's what I'd like to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. I really think it's important. I always think it's great when, people from around the world reach out and then they notice that we're out there. I think it's a very heartening feeling. And for you to reach out to us during Ramadan to talk about our experiences as Muslim journalists is very welcoming. I think it's something that we always want to talk about and always want to discuss. And, like Sabrina said, we don't necessarily always talk about Islam and being Muslim, but it's always good to see that there's others out there, not just in our own cities, not just in our own country, but around the world. It's just very heartening. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mania?
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to be the speaker today. So I just hope that the presentation, all of you can take some positive point from this presentation.
And that's it. We have to end this session, unfortunately, but my colleagues from United States, they still have hours to go before breakfasting, right? And I believe that this talk is really, really an eye-opener for all of us about U.S., about being Muslim female journalists in the country. And thank you very much, Sabrina, Rumana, Mania. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you, everyone. See you next time. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And then I go back to Yasmin. Yasmin, over to you.
Thank you, Ibu Yayan, for moderating this evening's event, and also for Ibu Nia, Miss Sabrina, and Miss Rumana for being our speakers this evening. Now, earlier in the event, I asked you guys a question. Who was the first woman reporter to wear a hijab in the United States? So, who was the first woman? She was Tahira Rahman. In February 8th, 2018, that was the day she made her first broadcast journalist for WHBF, a television station covering the Quad Cities region in Illinois and Iowa. It was also the day when she made history, when she first became a full-time broadcast TV reporter in America to wear a hijab on air. So unfortunately, nobody got the answer correctly tonight, but don't worry, you guys can tune in next time from the beginning of the event, because that's when we share our social media question. Now, also earlier in the event, I told you guys that At America is having a giveaway as part of our 10th anniversary celebration and also a celebration of Earth Day this month. We're inviting you guys so you guys don't miss out on a chance to receive one of the 5 folding bikes that we are giving out. So how can you guys participate? You guys can go to the link below at bit.ly/payearthforward for more information. Now, how can you guys develop a great idea at a place like At America? It's really easy. You can just go to our website at www.atamerica.or.id, select Create a Program, and go to Collaborate with us. All proposals coming to us will be reviewed, and your event might be featured here soon. And while you guys are on our website, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter. We won't spam you, we promise. We'll only send you updates just once a week to your inbox. And also don't forget to follow us on our social media for fun content, event updates, and many more. I hope you guys have a great evening and see you at the next At America TV event. Bye-bye, everybody.